Okay, just setting up the recording. Let me share my screen and then hopefully you will be able to see the slides, and I'll just put it into slideshow for you. Excellent. Okay, thank you. So hello and welcome to the PMO Code, a structured, repeatable approach I have created for building confident, capable and credible PMOs. In this overview, I will take you through the 8 pillars of excellence to help you discover pathways to deepen your expertise. This course is useful for beginners and experts alike. For beginners, to help introduce you into the world of PMOs, and for experts, to give you an aid memoir, as there are always things that we could do better. Okay, so welcome, and I'll let me set the context. I'm Sian Lewis, for those who don't know me. I'm a PMO expert with over 30 years experience in setting up and running PMOs across the world and across many industries. And I guess I've noticed over those 30 years that PMOs and project managers were not being trained in the way that I was trained when I first started out in my career. I know there are formal trainings out there, I know Prince 2, P3O, MOP, etc. But when I was looking, I could not seem to find any training that people could dip in and out of, and help with real world problems. And this is why I created the PMO Academy and the PMO Code, so we can ensure structure, consistency and capability in today's PMO practices, a place where people can come and ask questions. We have a community of people who can actually help people who are starting out on their career, or as I said, people who are further down their career but just need something to collaborate against. So I hope you take away practices that you can immediately implement into your PMO from following this overview. So PMO the landscape today is that I think PMOs are facing increasing pressure to demonstrate value and drive strategy and navigate the complexity of delivery today and managing diverse portfolios of change. We've got products, services, systems, change. I mean, there's a whole load of things going on at the moment. Then how do we bring all that together and actually deliver it in a structured way? And I think the other thing is that PMOs have historically been seen as the admin function of an organization, take minutes, set up meetings, rather than actually being seen as strategic delivery enablers. And, I think we've all encountered common obstacles for us to try to do that, in terms of resource constraints, unclear mandates, and maybe unfriendly stakeholders as well, because they don't understand what a PMO does. But if we actually communicate out to people what the PMO does, we actually we can demonstrate the value of the PMO, and we've got a clear mandate. This will give us opportunities if we take them. So to help us make sure that the PMO is understood, that we can demonstrate value, and that actually we are an enhancement to delivery rather than a barrier to delivery, I've created the PMO Code. It's a comprehensive framework built on 8 interconnected pillars of excellence. And during this training, I'll provide an overview of all 8 of those pillars. We don't have time to go deep in this overview, but there is a training on each of these pillars in the Academy where we will go into much more detail. So rest assured, this particular module is just an overview on explaining what each of those 8 pillars are. Okay, so the first pillar is clarity. And this is when you start with, this is the why. Why does a PMO required? Why are we doing this? So we need to define the position, purpose and value of the PMO. This is the clarity and the foundation of PMO success. Without a well-defined purpose and actually aligning it to strategic objectives, even the most capable of PMOs will struggle to demonstrate their value to organization. So when you're setting up a PMO, you need to understand what the strategic objectives of that organization are and align your initiatives to those objectives. If there is a target operating model available, you need to position it against that target operation model. And I'm saying if because I know there's a lot of organisations that don't have that in place at the moment. Because if you think about it, you need to understand the way the organisation is working today. You need to understand the way the organisation is working in the future, which is your target operating model. And then your portfolio of work are the activities to get you from where you are today to where you want to be. So therefore, you need to align all those activities within the portfolio to that future state. If the only reason for not doing something that relying to that future state is if you need to do something in the interim to actually get you further down the line, i.e., you need to put a new piece of technology in or something like that to help you in the short term. And that, as long as that can take you along the route, it might not necessarily be directly linked to those activities, but it's a stepping stone along the way. And then once you've identified those activities that you need to get you to your target operator model, you need to go, actually, we don't have the money, we don't have the resources, or we don't have the time to do all of that. What are the key things that we need to do? So therefore, we need to prioritize those pieces of work. So the most important pieces of work come first. And so to help you do that, you will need to start to understand what the benefits of each of those activities are. And benefits can be in terms of financials. Actually, it's going to add to the bottom line, or it will help us, improve our capability, improve our market share. It will be non-financial benefits that can actually be tracked and monitored as you move towards that target operating model. So at a portfolio level, that is what you need to understand and clarify. But then also at a PMO level, you also need to understand from a PMO perspective what it is we need to do. And we need to understand what our PMO vision is, the mission, what the mandate for the PMO in your organisation is going to be like. And that mandate can change from different organisation to different organisation. And then once you have got that mandate agreed, what is the roadmap that PMO is going to follow to deliver on your mandate? And then once you've understood what your mandate is and what your roadmap are, then actually, what are the PMO services that we are going to offer to help us move along that roadmap and to deliver on our value proposition? There's a lot in there, in which you can see why there's a one-day course just on actually unpacking everything in there. But basically, this sort of pillar sort of determines the why we're doing it from a portfolio's perspective, but also from a PMO perspective. So you're setting yourself up for success. Then the second pillar is the collaboration, the who. You cannot set up a PMO in isolation, and often a PMO doesn't have direct management of things. We do a lot through influencing. So influence is key to a successful PMO. And in order to influence properly, you need to understand who the key people you need to build relationships with are. So you need to understand from a stakeholder engagement perspective, you need to build the relationships with the people that will help the PMO move forward, but also who are the key stakeholders for each of those activities that we talked about, taking you from where you are now to where you want to be, and actually liaising with each of those stakeholders to make sure that the delivery of those activities is as stress-free as possible. So it's trying to build those authentic relationships with those key decision makers to influence and to manage expectations along the way. As part of that overall stakeholder management piece, you would also need to understand how you're going to communicate with everybody. Will it be through meetings, governance meetings, project meetings, face-to-face, email? And there will be different ways of communicating for different types of messaging. So again, you need to work through what messages you're going to communicate and how, and then how often, and then the meanings of those. And actually, my recommendation here would be, and we'll get into it a bit later, is that actually any key messaging you don't do through emails. You try to have face-to-face conversations, and anything that's going offline and you want to get resolved into a governance meeting, or is you have the face-to-face meetings with the key decision makers before you go into that meeting, so they're not hit blind. Okay, and then also those are the sort of the key stakeholders. But I think with a PMO, what I have found is also that you need to build cross-functional cooperation. So I've worked in an engineering company, I've worked in financial services, so in order to get what I want to help going forward in terms of my processes and controls, I formed cross-functional groups, sort of thing, with engineers who understand the service, the ITIL framework and things like that, to how that can work into the framework I was putting into place, where there were duplications, where there were things that we could manage together, and just building those relationships across the company as well, so that if you put in a process that would, say resource management, for instance, and you had to work then with the resource managers across the company, rather than rolling out a diktat to say this is how resource management is going to work at the portfolio level, you can build those alliances, build those relationships up, so that actually when you need to do something like that, you've got people on your side who can actually help you deliver something for the whole organization. So it's actually understanding who are the people across that organization that you need to build those collaborations with and work with effectively rather than against. And again, this all comes back to that influencing and getting what is needed from a PMO perspective agreed across an organization. Okay, hang on. Let me move on to the next one. So the next pillar then is the capability. And when we talk about capability, it's a capability within the PMO, the skills, the structure, the people you've got, but also the capability of the organization to deliver change. Sort of thing. So from a PMO perspective, we need to think about, what structure is the best structure for that PMO. And I think those who've done P3O and MOP know there are various different structures, so you need to tailor the structure that's best for your company. If you have a portfolio office, that should be a permanent structure, and then depending on the number of programs and projects, what are the temporary structures you need to put into place to deliver, to get the information of the project rolling up to the program, up to the portfolio, what skills, what resources, how many people you need in your PMO in order to deliver a good service. And I guess most of us have always been there, where we would always like more resources than we've actually got. But then what do you do with what you've actually got, and how can you do that optimally? Resourcing and capacity management, again, within your PMO, but also, and I think I mentioned this earlier, what are those resources that we need to deliver from where we are today to where we want to be? What are the skill sets we need? What are the skills that we're missing? What are the skills we need to recruit? Because actually how we work today might not be how we work in the future. How are we going to skill up our resources to meet the demands of the future? So again, from a PMO perspective, you need to understand that resource view across the piece. Then once you understand, I'm going back to PMO structure now. Once you understand what your PMO structure is, and then you actually understand the skills you need to run your PMO, what competency frameworks you need to put into place, and maturity assessments to put into place to make sure that your people are getting the right training and the right skills in order to deliver on that series of change. And then the final thing is actually, which is part of any function, the things you need to understand, how are you going to help deliver leadership development across the piece, and that could be then from your PMO perspective. It could also be from a project management and change management perspective. So again, thinking about what it is you need to put into place to make sure that you are resourced up in order to deliver the PMO services that you said you would in your mandate. And then the corollary of that is at the portfolio level, is to make sure that we've actually got a clear picture of any of the resources required to deliver all those activities, where the constraints are, where we've got to develop people, and where we've got to buy in different resources. So it's basically, again, understanding what that resource picture is and then working out what you need to do with it. Okay, the next pillar then is the operations, what I call the how, which is the engine of the PMO. How do you set yourself up for operational excellence that will provide consistency and standardized practices across the piece? So determine which frameworks and methodologies you're going to use, and there's waterfall, hybrid, agile, there's a whole load of product management, there's a whole load of different methodologies and frameworks out there. You need to work through which one is the best for your organization. And that could be taking bits of various different frameworks and methodologies and working out, actually, for this particular piece of work, this is what we're going to do it. As long as it is understood, you have got the processes and the steps and phases understood for that particular framework, you can then go, okay, for this particular piece of work, we are doing this. Because of the complexity or the size of it, we need to have these extra gates in or different phases in, or actually, because it's not so complicated and it's quite risk-free, we can do X, Y, and Z. So here, the key thing is to tailor your frameworks and methodologies to the delivery. And not one size does not fit all. And it's, and this is where skill and experience comes in to help people understand how you're going to deliver different pieces of change. And again, then once you've got your frameworks and your methodologies sorted out, you need to have processes and templates to help you do that, to give you that consistent, standardized way of working. So actually, from a risk management perspective, this is how we're going to manage risks, going forward across the whole piece. And therefore, everybody understands what a risk is and then how you actually manage it. This is how we're going to report. So this is what a red is, across the piece. So everybody understands what a red, an amber, and a green is. So there are no inconsistencies and no preconceived ideas. And again, from a reporting perspective, you need to work through, okay, this is how we're going to report. These are the KPIs we're going to do it. This is the heartbeat we're going to set up so that everybody knows information has to be in at a certain time. So therefore, you are always reporting on data that is understood to be at a certain point in the month, sort of thing. So therefore, you are not comparing apples with apples all the time and not apples with oranges because something has come in a week later and the landscape has changed. You also then need to make sure that you have the right skill sets here to look at trend analysis, to look at the data, to understand what the data is telling you so that the right messages go up at the right time, sort of thing. So for me, a key part of the portfolio then is something having the analysis skills to look at the data that's come through, the data is assured that we know is right, to be able to give the right messages up to the right stakeholders. And then tools and systems. I started out many years ago when the tools we have today didn't exist, and we did a lot of it through Excel spreadsheets. Luckily, the world has moved on now. There are PPM tools, which is portfolio and project management tools out there. So it's understanding what tools are the right ones for you. There are tools ranging from huge enterprise, sort of systems to those much smaller, more agile PPM tools for organizations that aren't as big and don't need to spend as much money on those tools. So again, there is a whole range of tools out there, and one of the modules we'll do later is on how you go about assessing the tool that's right for you. But understanding what tools and systems you need to put into place from your PMO to make sure that your PMO can operate excellently and consistently at a high level. Okay, the next pillar then is what I call the controls, which are the guardrails. Controls can be seen as a blocker to delivery, sort of thing, because, oh, I've got to do this or I've got to do that. But if they're tailored and done correctly, they can create confidence, consistency, and credibility. sort of thing. So and I think the key word here is tailored, so again, I think I mentioned before, one size does not fit all. It is also, it is actually, you need to tailor the methodology, the way you're going to how you're going to deliver that, and then actually what controls and what governance we're going to put into place for this particular piece of work. As I mentioned before, a smaller, maybe less risky piece of work does not need the governance and the control that a large, expensive, risky piece of work does. So again, there needs to be expertise applied to this and common sense to make sure that actually the right controls are put in place. So governance, for smaller pieces of work could be governance light, and then governance. So basically, you need to put in your delivery and your investment governance processes in so that everybody knows what process they need to follow, what level of governance can control what level of spend, and then what are the escalation routes and the tolerance levels that are required to be able to escalate a problem from project to program up to portfolio level to be put in front of the right people to help unblock problems. Let's be real. There will always be problems, sort of thing. No project will go sail straight forward. There will be problems at different stages, and it's actually understanding then what's that route up that I can get my problem unblocked. So we talked about governance, then financial oversight. We need to understand what we are spending. So again, we will need to understand the budgets, the actuals, the accruals, the forecasting, and track it in such a way so that we can put in early warning signs if and when it looks like the costing is out of control. Trade management, risks, actions, issues, and dependencies. We need to put into place the right logs or frameworks and processes for each of those so that, again, they're all managed in a consistent and logical way. We talked about benefits in the clarity pillar, but once we've identified what those benefits are, we need to then put in a benefits tracking into place to make sure that we are on track to deliver the benefits that the project was set up for in the first place. And I think we've probably all been there where the work has been done up front. You've identified the costs and you've identified the benefits, and then as the project goes through, the cost seems to go up and the benefits seem to go down. I'm not saying that's all but that is quite familiar, sort of thing. So you need to put your benefits tracking into place to see if that actually does happen, what your early warning signs are. So actually what we said it was going to be benefit from this piece of work isn't anymore, so we can have a discussion, because actually if it's not going to deliver what you said it's going to deliver, is it worth doing? So at some point you can have that conversation. So again, from a benefits tracking thing, we do need to understand what the benefits of that particular piece of work are and if they're going to change over time. Baseline control, so again, understanding that when you start a project, this is the budget, this is the timescales, this is the risk profile, these are the resources we needed, sort of thing to deliver this piece of work. If any of those then change outside of any agreed tolerances, you need to then use change control to manage that, and that needs to go through governance. So this should hopefully then eliminate scope creep, even because you had a certain amount of money to deliver a certain amount of function. If that function has now changed and the scope has creeped, but the money hasn't, what's going to happen? So for me, baseline control is one of those key processes that you need to put into place to avoid slippages, to avoid overruns that might have been managed earlier. So for me, that is a key guardrail that you need to put into place. And then finally, something which sounds quite innocuous, document control, but if you have centralized management of documents, your version control, accessibility, you have a single source of truth, and therefore everybody is using the same documents to understand the reason why this project is, what it's delivering, how it's doing it, so it's no surprises, and everybody is actually thinking of the same outcomes. Again, it sounds quite simple, but it's actually a key component of making sure that the right things are being delivered in the right way, and everyone's working from the same version of documents. Because we do know that can change, and or as has happened in the past. And one of my key learnings was, again, version control wasn't probably as strong as it was. The wrong version of requirements went out to the supplier for delivery, and of course then the wrong solution was delivered. So again, just be conscious of what needs to be done, because a lot of those things that are done in the background you might not see necessarily straight away, but it can just help the operational excellence of your PMO, to help, or what's the word I'm looking for, to not introduce errors where there doesn't need to be errors. Okay, so tailored controls are not bureaucracy. They are the guardrails that can create the confidence, consistency, and credibility. Oops, hang on. Right. Okay. Again, assurance. Again, assurance can be seen as an unwanted overhead, but again, the word comes back to tailored. But if it's tailored correctly, you can significantly aid to the successful outcome of delivery of change. And we can provide assurance at different levels. So you need to know your lines of defense for your organization, and then tailor appropriately to those lines of defense. We'll go into lines of defenses a lot more in the assurance module when we come to that. But the whole idea of assurance is to provide that independent confidence, so you can run health checks and reviews at project, program, and portfolio level. You can put in quality assurance, at gates or at reviews, to make sure that you're validating deliverables against standards and expectations. One of the companies I worked for, part of their licensing agreements was they had to we had audits 3-4 times a year via an external independent reviewer, to make sure that we were doing things in line with what was in the license. So that's a much more assurance heavy type of organization. Another organization I've worked in where it isn't so much, sort of thing, but actually if you're ready to go live, you need to make sure that actually the solution, if you're testing, if it's a software solution, that your tests are delivered against your requirements, that actually the solution that you're implementing is the solution that people want, and making sure that actually the testing and everything like that has been done correctly, so that you actually, when you put it into a live environment, it's not going to muck everything else up. So you make sure you go through those particular gates to ensure that when you're moving from a development or environment to a live environment, that it should be seamless. For me, then also, from an assurance perspective, you can build in quality, put in peer reviews, put in, if documents are being written, putting who's going to review it, who's going to sign it off. So you can start to build in quality from the get-go. And then you need to make sure that actually your assurance models that you've put into place, and making sure that actually that you can mature those models as you work through, so you can then do ongoing measurements of the organizational project management maturity. Most mature models out there are a few out there, have high five phases, and you can work through and go, actually, we've started off at phase 1. We don't want to get to phase 5 because actually it's going to cost us too much to maintain at phase 5, but actually we want to get to maturity level 3 or 4, and this will be our roadmap, to do that. And we'll come on to that a bit more when we move on to the evolve pillar. Okay, so then the next pillar is performance, so which is the measure of how we're doing. So again, at a portfolio level, and then also at a PMO level. So at a portfolio level, you've got your list of where you want to be, and then so the whole idea is you need to track where you are against that roadmap in terms of probably money, resources, benefits, your KPIs, your risks, your issues, and finances, sort of thing. So identify what are the KPIs that you want to track, and how you're going to report them, and also and how you're going to, if you're going to report things, you need to understand how you're going to measure them as well. So you also always need a baseline that you can measure from, and then you can do reporting against it. Any insights, any key messages or any key trends that the data is telling you, you need to pull together and craft it into the messages to help people make the decisions. That I always see a PMO as making sure that the right information is in the right time for the right people to make the right decisions, sort of thing. So then, and it sounds quite simple, but there's a lot involved in each step of that way. But so for me, then this performance is actually making sure that we track the performance of the portfolio, and we track it performance of each project and program rolling up to the portfolio. We have our early warning measures into place, and then we can then call out where things are not enabling us to meet that performance and the monitoring. And so for me, that is the whole point about putting into place what you want to report on, and you need to get that agreed, and then actually how you're going to report on it. And then from a PMO perspective, you need to then say how you are delivering against your mandate, against the roadmap that was agreed, and against your performance against it. Because again, if you can put that into place early on, you've got a baseline from which to track against, and therefore you can always demonstrate the value that a PMO is giving. And then the last pillar I've called change, and it's the evolve, because for PMOs to be successful, we cannot stand still. PMOs need to constantly evolve and change to be relevant and to be of value to an organisation. And we know sort of things. So we need to instill a continuous improvement culture, so, learn from every project, enhance our processes, enhance our practices, to make sure that it's always the best that we can possibly do. And especially when you're first starting out, you'll probably want to put some simple processes into place just to get something in, yes, just get the basics right. But actually, over time, you can enhance and improve those processes by adding in more steps in line with your maturity and in line with the organization's maturity. PMOs need to be agile, sort of thing, and we need to be able to react quickly to shifting priorities or market conditions, because what once was the strategic outcomes of an organization can change in line with it, or maybe some new regulatory comes in, the market position has changed, and we're now looking for something, we're not going for that market share, we're going for that market share, so we need to be adaptable and agile to change in that way, but also in terms of new methodologies, new ways of working also need to be considered, because we've got to be able to be seen as our delivery partner and someone to help, rather than going, no, you can't do that because our processes say not. If the processes still don't fit, we'll need to go back and look at the processes as well, because actually we need to be able to be seen to be working with the organisation rather than against the organisation. We also need to be innovative, and we experiment with new technologies, new approaches to stay ahead. As I said, when I first started, everything was done off Excel spreadsheets. MS Project had literally just started to come out, so we could start to put together plans that way. MS Project isn't, Microsoft are no longer supporting MS Project. So what's the new way we need to put plans together? How can we track milestones? So there's always ways of looking, what the new technology, what's coming down the road, horizon scanning to see what's next, to make sure, and then saying, actually, can we use that now, or is it too maybe not, but actually we'll look again in 6 months' time. It might be something that we want to consider then, so again, it's always part of that PMO involvement and innovation to make sure that we provide as much value to the organization as we can. And then finally, called it within the change, is that I'm a great believer that PMO in delivering, sort of change into an organization needs to work really closely with, if they call them change managers, or people who are responsible for the end users been implementing any change that the organization does to the end users. So for me, we need to understand and work very closely with those change managers to understand the overall change landscape, because we cannot deliver change in isolation. It needs to be understood where it fits amongst everything else, because the PMO won't manage all change, because there will be small bits of change, business as usual stuff, which can also make changes to the end users. But we need to be aware of that all, because actually, we're going, okay, so basically maybe operations are changing the way they do something, but actually within change, a new system's coming along, which will put it into a new system and change that. So again, if we're aware of everything, we can then go, hang on a minute, this is happening over there. Will that have an impact on that? Let's have a discussion. It might not. It might, but the whole idea is actually you're going to try and put that particular change in. Then you do realize that there's 3 or 4 different pieces of work going on for that particular depot or that particular site at that moment in time. The people who are receiving the change can't take it all. That they're going to have about 4 big pieces of change of the way they work within the space of 4 months. Let's talk, let's discuss, let's work through what is the best way to land that change so that the end users don't get overwhelmed, and actually what's the best way for the organization in order to schedule that particular piece of change. So for me, that's a big piece of what the PMO needs to do. It's not just what the portfolio is delivering, it's actually understanding the change landscape into which that portfolio is being delivered. Okay, so that's a quick whistle stop tour through the 8 pillars that I've pulled together, sort of thing. And then actually, as I said, we're going to have more deeper involved modules going through each ones of those and going through each of the points I've made in each of those modules in a lot more detail, so that people can really understand what that actually means. Because I appreciate this is a shortened version, and people going, what does that mean? There will be time later on for me to go through in more detail. This is just an overview of everything what the PMO code is and how we can pull it all together. And actually, if you implement each of the pillars, how you will then have a fully functioning, operationally excellent PMO. Okay, so I think I've said some of that on the earlier slide, but by applying the 8 pillars, you can deliver outcomes that can elevate you and your PMO. You can if you can get your mandate defined, you can align PMO with strategy. You have a clear value proposition. You create your enhanced stakeholder relationships. You can increase your influence. It can lead to a higher project success rate and predictability. You can have your early warning systems in place, and you can have your enhanced decision-making practices in place to ensure that the right information is got to the right people at the right time to make the right decision for the organisation. So now just thinking about your PMO journey, and where are you now? And I appreciate people will be in different stages, different states of where they are on the PMO journey. I know when I first started, got put into a project, didn't understand the context of the project across the whole piece. I was just told, this is what you're delivering, get on with it, type thing. And then when I moved into PMO, it was, again, you got to see bits of projects because you weren't working with the project all the time, and so you didn't understand how that piece of work fit into everything else, and therefore you don't understand how what you do down here can impact on what's happening up there, and actually decisions could be made here that actually might have a bad impact on what's on the top, rather than a good impact, because you're making decisions in isolation. So what I'd like you to think about is evaluate where you are in your PMO against those 8 pillars to identify strengths and growth opportunities, and then talk about prioritization. Nothing, we can't do everything at once. What is that key first thing you're going to work on, to help improve and move forward? And then, as part of the learning pathways and what I want to try and do with the PMO Academy, I've created a PMO bootcamp which you can access, which gives you, I think there's 6 different aspects of PMOs. I can offer personalised coaching, and there's also been membership within the PMO Academy. Some will be free, some of these courses will be free, others will be paid courses. But as I said, there will be, for each of those pillars, there will be a more detailed course sitting behind it. And so people can come in and look at that. And then, as I said, each of those pillars will be covered in a lot more detail. We'll also look at how you can go about setting up a PMO from scratch and talking through that. There will be little things around project management. There'll be project management 101, and then we'll also have an area on change management and how we use change management to help enhance and deliver a PMO's capability. So I've hoped you've enjoyed that quick canter through the PMO code. Oh, hang on, I've got one more slide first. So you need to wrap up and reflection. So one insight that you're taking away, if you can think about what resonated with you, and which pillar speaks to the current challenges that you are facing. And then if you can identify what action you'll take next, read it through, put it into the chat, sort of thing. What I want to try and do is get this to be a much more active community, so people can take things where, oh, I didn't know that, how about this, I'm trying to thinking about this, what the best way forward is. If you can start to think about that, put that into the community chat, and then you'll have people who can actually help you work on those particular aspects. So if you can think about, take some time to reflect on these questions, and then the PMO code principles and the PMO Academy can help you move forward with that. So now I can get to my final slide, and say thank you. And I hope that has made sense. I've hoped I've created something that gives a pathway and a roadmap through all the things you need to put together to create a PMO. I appreciate it's a lot, and my advice would be start simply, start with the basics. If you get bits of the pillars in each one, and then you build up your maturity levels, you'll start to then create a more rounded, more grounded PMO. But for me, you need to start with the basics first. Put in the key processes that you need. Identify those key stakeholders that you need to really help to get you up and running. Identify, what are those key governance things you need to put in place? What are those key assurance and guidelines you need to put in to help people go along? Again, keep it simple to start with, and then you can build and evolve as part of that continuous improvement process. So thank you for listening. Your journey to the PMO excellence starts now, sort of thing. And I'm hoping that the PMO Academy can help you take you along that way. Thank you.